happy Friday. Welcome to Happy Hour on the Your Strata Property Facebook page. It is great to be here with you. I am coming to you from wet, cold Sydney today. I am looking out my window, which is directly in front of me, and it is raining. It has been raining for most of the day, but I can't complain because if I want to, I can leave my home of an evening. I can go to a restaurant. I can go to the shops, and I know that is not the case for some of our friends around the country. So we are thinking of you, our Melburnians. I was on a webinar this week and I think I called you Melbourneites. I don't think that's a thing. I think it's Melburnians. If someone wants to let me know. We're thinking of you, our Victorian neighbours, and hoping that you are all doing well. I know that we have some Melbourneites who are regularly here on Happy Hour with us. So if you are tuning in, I would love for you to say a special hello and we can send you our love. But it is great to have made it to Friday. I have just posted earlier on the page that I have had a particularly massive week, feeling a little bit tired, but have this weird energy. I think it's because I have done a big webinar this week. I have done quite a few interviews, podcast interviews, some other special interviews for something that is coming up. Those of you who are members will know about that and may have an idea of what I've been up to. But lots and lots going on, which has led me to Friday where I feel tired, but I feel very fulfilled. I feel like I am in my zone, the place where I belong, and having had a productive week. But I'm looking forward to winding down with you all and getting into a discussion of the week that has been. What are the hot topics that are on everybody's minds? And of course, I have a special guest expert with you this week to bring to you this week. I am seeing Henry there saying, thanks, Amanda, Robert in. Sorry, Henry. And I know that you are you in Melbourne, Henry? Let me know. I did later send you my love, I have to say. Petra is here. Hey, how you doing, Petra? Good to see you. If you're coming in, drop me a hello so I can see who's here. I am really looking forward to seeing you. If you have brought a drink to Happy Hour, being a Friday, having had a big week, something that I look forward to on a Friday, because of course Friday is the only day that I do this, right? Don't we? Yeah, sure. Hey, Melissa, good to see you. Hey, Deb, it is definitely a TGIF for Deb. Cheers. Bruce is in Blackheath and it is pouring. Will it snow? Let us know, Bruce. It has been chilly down here, down the bottom of the mountain. And yes, Petra is doing fine. Awesome. Okay, so yes, let you know that I had a big week. I have the webinar that we did yesterday was for it wasn't for Blacktown. That was June, Amanda. The webinar that we did yesterday was for Cumberland Council, talking all about bylaws. And I know a lot of you who are here on that page were also on the webinar. So it was really great to see some friendly faces on there, as well as doing webinar, podcast interviews, working with our members inside the community. I do actually do some legal work sometimes. These days, the legal work has been happening rather late at night, which also makes for an exhausted week. I have to say, and I know a few of you are also my clients, I have some fabulous clients, and that just helps so much when you are trying to do many things at a busy time to have wonderful clients. Some of you who are business owners may have noticed this, and I've said this in my business group that I'm part of. When we are in difficult times and we are business owners, small business owners, I really believe that we are as good as our clients. And something that has really put me in good stead during these difficult, challenging times is that I've realized I have really fabulous clients, some of whom I've worked with for a number of years, others who are new. But thank you, those of you who are here and who are listening and who I know, because I do share a bit online and platforms like this, what's going on. I know you know how busy I've been. And it is good to see you all here supporting each other and supporting me as well. I really appreciate that. So there you go. I wasn't going to go there, but here we are. And I'm seeing many more of you coming on through and saying hi. Hello to Michael. And yes, Henry is in Melbourne grad. Charles is saying hi. Emiliana, good to see you. Lucky to connect indeed. And Deb is saying, are the webinars recorded? So Deb, the webinars that I do for the local councils, those are recorded for the councils, and those who register for the webinar do get a unique link where they can go and watch the webinar replay. Okay, so I'm not sure if you have registered for one of those council bylaw webinars. If you have, let me know which one and I will shoot you the link. There's been a few of them this year. But they are my bylaw webinars. I've been running for a little while. If you're a member, you'll also have access to a version of those as well. So let me know. And I always update them with what the new cases are. We've got lots of new cases that come out in New South Wales, particularly about harsh, unconscionable or oppressive bylaws. What do those words mean? We're talking a lot about pets at the moment. So always good to tune in and get an update on what's happening in the bylaw space. Good to see you, Wendy, who is in South Yarra. Excellent. So come on in, say hello. It is happy hour. I want to check in with you guys and see if you have yet tuned in to podcast episode 225, if you can believe it, which was published this week. It was a discussion between Rena and myself, my often co-host, my regular co-host, Rena Van Alst, Strata Manager of Strata Central. And I want to check in with you about what you thought of that episode, if you've had a listen. And I'll give you a little peek if you haven't. We were talking about wearing masks on the common property during the pandemic. And the question that Rena put to me, and I want to raise this with you guys, I know some of you are strata managers, a lot of you are committee members, a lot of you are in Melbourne, as we're seeing here in the comments. What's the deal? What's going on in your buildings? Are your residents asking you about should we wear masks? Can we force residents to wear masks when on the common property? Now, I will tell you, I had a little dig around, and this was after recording the episode with Rena. What happens when Rena and I record our episodes is we do not prepare, we do not practice. A few people ask us, did you do a practice run first? No, we do not. We don't have time for that, being busy people. We have a spreadsheet and we pop in during the week or as we encounter our wins and our challenges, we pop them into the spreadsheet and we plan to discuss them on the podcast that week or in an upcoming week, whenever's the next time that we're recording. And we generally don't get a chance to look at what each other has put into the spreadsheet before we press the record button. And genuinely what you're hearing is Rena saying, Amanda, I've had this challenge this week. And what do you think? What should we do? So it is very much, if I am answering a question for Rena or she for me, we are doing it on the run, on our feet. And Rena asked me that question. Building of mine in Potts Point, where we have had a bit of an outbreak in Sydney, wants to force residents and visitors to wear masks when they are on the common property. Can we do that? Is that legal? How do we do that? And I said to her, from the visitor perspective, call it the third party perspective, people who don't live in the building, who are coming into the building for a purpose, a trade, a visitor, I think you can. I think you can set a condition of entry that says, if you want to come into this building, then you must wear a mask. Be very careful that that's done at a general meeting level so that you have the authority, if you're a committee, of the general meeting saying that that's the rule that they want in place. But I was distinctly uncomfortable, and I said this on the podcast, about forcing residents to wear masks when on the common property. And I said that I felt that was because the common areas, the lift, the hallways, the stairs, the corridors, you might have a shared terrace, you might have a garden area. The common areas are private spaces pursuant to our New South Wales law, private spaces that people enjoy just as much as someone in a freestanding home would enjoy their garden, their hallway, their front entranceway. And I felt that if, for example, a bylaw was passed that would require residents to wear masks when on the common property, that may be an unacceptable intrusion on their rights to use as to how they use their private space. Those were my thoughts, and I referred back to the public health orders that were in place in New South Wales earlier this year, that regulated the stay-at-home orders, basically, and talked about restrictions on places of residence, staying in your place of residence, and define that place of residence quite broadly, so that it included all of those common areas. So you could have residents congregating on those common areas quite legally. So that's my stream of consciousness from the podcast, but I'm hoping that's triggering some thoughts for you guys, because I really do want to hear from you what you thought of that, if you've listened to it or if you're hearing it here now for the first time. Particularly if you're a manager, do you have questions from residents about this? If you are in Victoria, is this something that you are having to think about? I'm seeing Melissa there saying no mask questions as yet in my blocks, but I'm sure it won't be long. I think when we start seeing our shopping centres, so we're seeing Woolworths at the moment in New South Wales or in Sydney, saying that they are strongly recommending that if people are going to their stores, they should be wearing masks. I was at the shops today, sorry to rub it in again, Henry, and I did notice there's a lot more people in my local area who are wearing masks when they are out and about. Megan is saying, hello, sunshine. I'm assuming, Megan, is that me, sunshine? Because I know you're not in Sydney, Megan, anymore, but there ain't no sunshine here where I am. Sophie is saying the same argument would apply to smoking, yet we can regulate people smoking. Yes, very good point there, Sophie. And that's a really good example, because we're looking at what are the impacts here, what are the health impacts, right? And that's where we find strong grounds for banning smoking in common areas, and even banning smoking, people not being able to smoke within their lots. We have cases in New South Wales that say we can have bylaws that ban people from smoking in their own homes. So that is very interesting indeed. Good comparison there. So something to think about. I did have a little dig into what the state of the law is in Victoria at the moment. And for those of you who are there, we've got a couple of links, if you haven't come across them yet, from the Department of Health. There is what looks to be a fairly comprehensive webpage for apartments and multi-dwelling properties, they call them, guidelines during coronavirus. Rochelle is going to pop that link into the comments there for you. Information for residents in apartments and multi-dwelling properties with shared facilities. And it talks about things like closing your pools and your gyms. I think this one that I'm looking at was published around the 22nd of July. It doesn't deal with the mask question. And that makes me think that in Victoria, you do not have laws that mandate the wearing of masks in your common areas, in your apartment buildings. Be really interested to hear from anyone who's across those laws for the Australian College of Strata Lawyers. I serve on the council there with some other clever cookie lawyers from around the country, and it was brought to our attention, I believe, by our president, Tim Graham, who is a lawyer in Melbourne, that there was a fairly good document produced by the Victorian government about, again, managing COVID in our apartment buildings in Victoria. So Rochelle is going to pop the link to that document in the comments there for us. So check that one out if you are in Vic. And yes, as I said at the beginning, we are thinking of you. We are sympathizing. We are here. This is, God, what would we do without technology? To be able to have our Friday drinks virtually, yes, but to be able to talk to each other, to see each other, to connect. I was running this webinar yesterday, and I've been running webinars for a few years now, and I have noticed the increased skill level when it comes to the use of technology these days, particularly Zoom. Everybody is so much more comfortable with Zoom. 2 years ago, I would have 2 team members waiting online before a webinar started, ready to face the barrage of emails that would come in saying, I don't have my link doesn't work, how do I get on? I can't hear Amanda, I can't see Amanda, what's going on? And we would gradually deal with those and get everybody moving. Now I have my 2 team members sitting there waiting for support requests, and everybody is great, is a real expert now at using technology. So thank goodness we have it, and I feel really connected having chatting always to many people throughout the week, whether it's hundreds on a webinar or it's you guys here on a Facebook Live, or it is a podcast interview, or it is my team. I think we're getting used to it. And Rena said that on the podcast this week as well. It's weird to be out talking to people in real life, in person. I had a slip on the podcast, which my editor did not edit out, which said I was out and I was wearing clothes. I do wear clothes at home. I was just dressed, you know what I mean? Real clothes, and for a woman, you'd get dressed, you'd look a bit nicer. It was fun, good to be out. But we are so used to being at home these days and adapting, and that is the adaptable nature of us as human beings. Now, I have another human being here ready and waiting to join us for Happy Hour, our expert guest waiting in the wings, and I'm going to bring him on very, very shortly. His name is Thomas Gibbons, and he is a director at McCall Lewis Lawyers in New Zealand, and he specialises in property and commercial law. Now, very excitingly, Thomas has recently announced just this week that he is setting up a new sole practice. He is going out on his own, joining those of us who are out there doing our thing. I definitely want to talk to Thomas about that. His sole practice will be focusing on land development, resource management, and unit titles. Of course, unit titles being strata schemes, strata title, body corporate, community schemes, whatever you like to call it. In New Zealand, they call them unit titles. Thomas is a member of the Australian College of Strata Lawyers, and he sits on the board of Survey and Spatial New Zealand and the executive of the Waikato branch of the Property Council of New Zealand. He is a prolific writer and presenter, and most recently, the author of Unit Titles, Law and Practice, a practical guide to the Land Transfer Act. Thomas has written for various law journals in Australia and New Zealand, presented many, many seminars, webinars, conference papers, seminars that I have been lucky enough to be in the audience for. He often appears as an expert witness, including in the High Court on land development and unit titles matters. We are very spoiled indeed to have his expertise here with us today, not just to make us jealous of the haven that he is in at the moment, but to share some unit titles expertise with us. I am bringing on Thomas Gibbons right now. Hey, Thomas.
Hi, Amanda. How you going?
I am doing really well this happy Friday. How are you?
Yeah, good. It's good to get to Friday. It's been terrible weather here, but
Really?
it's nice to get to the stage of the week.
Indeed. Thank you for joining us. Now, let our viewers, and remind me, know exactly where you are in New Zealand.
So I'm in a city called Hamilton, which is around about an hour 20 south of Auckland, given our new expressway. So it's a city of about 170,000 people, and a great place to live.
Yes. Look, I was making Henry in Melbourne jealous, letting him know that I was in Sydney and I was going to the shops. When we think about you guys in New Zealand, we are insanely jealous. And our trans-Tasman travel bubble doesn't look like it's happening anytime soon, does it?
It doesn't. I was lucky enough to get over to Melbourne and Noosa in February for a couple of conferences, of course,
Yes.
and unit title strata conferences, of course. And look, it was great to be able to travel freely. Then there's some signs of change ahead. If it had been a month later, there's no way I would have got out of the country or back in. But yeah, changing times, crazy year.
Yeah, I was there with you in that at that conference at Noosa, and that was February, and it kind of it feels like a lifetime ago. It really does,
Really
and
does.
especially when we don't seem to have anything on the horizon, or the things that have been on the horizon are getting cancelled.
Yes, I'm definitely seeing an uptake in virtual conferences this year, which are nothing like the same thing.
No, it is true. Yes, there is something about the human contact. And what I was reading an article about this, the impact of virtual. And when we're on these big conferences, whether it's with our team or we're tuned into a large virtual conference, or I know I do a quarterly mastermind, and there's about 24 of us, and we've done those virtually. We've done one, and we've got another one coming up, and it's 2 days of online, and it is a real brain strain. And there's something
Mm.
about that, the way humans are wired, that we're just not wired to connect and communicate in that way.
Absolutely. I have a short attention span at the best of times. So, yeah, add video to that and it changes very quickly.
Yes, and very easy to get distracted by other things that might be going on your computer screen.
Absolutely.
So what is life like? Are you guys back to normal? Is it like this, no one says the C word? What is it like over there in New Zealand?
Yeah, so there's been obviously no one mentions the word. There's been almost collective memory loss about it. No one talks about lockdown. No one talks about what it was like anymore. It's really something people have wanted to move on from.
Really?
The new controversy is around people who are returning to New Zealand or coming here, often to see family members or to attend funerals sometimes and things like that, and being put in required quarantine in hotels, and big questions around who should pay for that, and also what happens when they escape. And there's been a few incidents around the
Escape.
place. Escape, yes, from these quarantine hotels. They don't have the tightest security in the world necessarily.
Wow.
There's been some examples of people escaping, going down to the shops, buying cigarettes, wine, that sort of thing.
Meeting up with security guards? No, that doesn't
Yes,
happen
I'm
in New
probably
Zealand.
more amused by it than I should be because it's obviously a very serious issue. But it has been a hot topic, and of course, this is an election year for us. So
Mhm.
issues like around how long wage subsidies should last, what's the best level of support for the economy and for business, and so on. These are very important topics at the moment, but no one
Mm.
talks about lockdown at all.
Well, fair enough, I suppose. When I think about it, I was initially surprised when you said that, but then I thought, I suppose, yes, let's get on with it. Let's get back to normal. That's something that we want to keep in the past, and that's where the focus is, on how we keep that in the past, I suppose.
Yeah, absolutely. It's there's been a time to move on mentality, and I think a lot of people went through that period of lockdown and came out the other end just wanting to do things and be active, and particularly a lot of the builder and developer clients I work with. Yeah, they're practical people who like to get outside, and the idea of being stuck doing nothing and not really interacting broadly was very frustrating. We've still got a
Mm.
huge housing shortage in this area, and they were very keen to get out and build and develop.
Yeah. Oh, good on them. What was it like under? I understand your lockdown was also referred to as a level 4 or a stage 4
Mhm.
lockdown, similar to what they're saying now in Melbourne. What were the restrictions at the time?
So, a range of them. The idea was that you would stay at home in what they called a bubble, and that bubble would usually be your immediate family. And then there was an ability for essential services to carry on. So, obviously, apart from police and fire and so on, dairies and supermarkets were essential services. Uh, there was quite a high degree of controversy around that because butchers were not, and some butchers geared up, bought meat, and then unfortunately found they couldn't stay
Oh,
open
gosh.
because the rules were developed very, very quickly. We went from level 2 to level 4 in a period of 48 hours or so.
Mhm.
The big difference from what I can tell in, say, Melbourne is that we also had no restaurants or takeaways at all during level 4. There was an ability to get food from a supermarket or another essential service provider delivered. So that extended to some bakery food, and very fortunately, Raglan roast coffee pods were able to be delivered during level 4. It was very, very, yeah, popular move. Uh, but no restaurants or takeaways. And I was taking food, grocery food, round to my parents from time to time, and when we got to level 3, I was able to take my dad a real coffee, and
Mm.
the look on his face as I walked up with that was like a kid at Christmas. It
Oh,
was
the
off
little
the chart
things.
joy for him to have real coffee again.
Wow. And what was the impact in particular on people who were living in apartments? And if you were working with any owners at that time or buildings, was there, I know in New South Wales, when we first had our public health orders come out, there's a lot of confusion about what we could do, couldn't do, closing common facilities, keeping them open. The New South Wales orders were different to the orders in Victoria, for example. We didn't have an order to close our facilities here, so committees were concerned about whether they should make that call or not. Can we congregate in our common areas, or does the public health order prevent us from doing that? What was it like in New Zealand for people in apartments in particular?
Yes, similar restrictions, and I suppose it comes down to the level of enforcement about them. I know a lot of bodies corporate were very concerned about common facilities and congregation of people, and that was certainly being monitored, I suppose, out in the wider community, and therefore to a lesser extent within buildings, but still the restriction there. So, I heard a story the other day about a group of four people who decided to meet up and sort of have a game on 2-on-2 soccer at the park under the ruse of guys of going for a walk, and getting told by the police to go home. There was a very real sense that any grouping, any contact was not to happen. The irony was that if you went into a supermarket, the same rules didn't seem to apply in the same way.
Mm-hmm.
And of course, you could go for a walk down the street, and on your own in your neighbourhood, that was fine. But seeing someone else on the way and grouping anywhere was a big problem. I know it's certainly something property managers grappled with initially, body corporate managers, exactly what should they be doing or not doing, how exactly did lockdown apply, what degree of service is an essential service in that context. So, and they were difficult issues because it all happened so quickly. And I do think at times there was a very, very real sense of them being quite arbitrary rules. There didn't seem
Mm-hmm.
to be a lot of method to them. And if you drove somewhere and tried to exercise there, you might get in trouble for driving there. And so, of course, some people were pretending that they were on the way to the supermarket or to drop groceries off to someone. Um, but in buildings, the same sorts of principles applied, and it was very real concern about common property giving rise to that kind of issue. I think it's also important to mention, probably similar to Australia, there were those who completely bought into the rules, and those who are a little bit more sceptical about them,
Mm.
and they approach them as, oh, this is just a bit of fun. We will make a joke about not being too close to someone else, same way as some people joke about health and safety issues, for example. Whereas some people were very, very strict, and I'm aware of people who did not leave the house once during that whole period.
Mm. And do you think that did we see any differences culturally, I suppose, from you're saying there, the rules were a bit arbitrary, sometimes they weren't clear. You might think in Australia you'd get some pushback, and I think we're seeing some of that in Melbourne, some pushback there where you're severely restricting somebody's freedom of movement, and the rules seem a bit arbitrary. It all happened very quickly in New Zealand, and you can understand why the rules may be a bit hazy when you're working so fast. Do you think New Zealanders culturally are able to or more willing to put up with that than Australians?
I think certainly New Zealanders were very culturally compliant, and it's very interesting to compare to not Australia perhaps yet, but the States, where there are
Mm,
protests and there are you won't make me wear a mask and all that kind of thing. I think uh, unfortunately, in some ways, the culture in New Zealand was, I saw some kids on bikes down the end of the shared driveway, and someone needs to report them to the police. There's a little bit of a dob on your neighbour sort of mentality, which I found personally quite disappointing.
mm,
And there was a lot of, Facebook just went wild, of course, and besides all these comments about how people better follow the rules or we'd be shut down for 6 months. Uh, there were also the world of Facebook challenges. So there was the 25 press ups a day for 25 days challenge, and there was the mum challenge of pick a photo, no comments, and day by day present a different photo, and the top album challenge and so on. So there were all these very, the virtual world took a different level, but there was this very real sense that, I mean, the team of 5 million, I believe, is quite overstated. That was one of the Prime Minister's comments, that we're a team of 5 million.
Mm.
But yeah, no, I think there was a high degree of compliance. Australia, yeah, I think my reflection looking at the Melbourne rules is they're just interestingly different. And we didn't have curfews here, but we didn't have takeaways either.
Mm.
I felt for a period of time in New Zealand there was a very strong sense of, we are all in this together. That lasted a couple of weeks. People really loved this idea that the Prime Minister and the Director General of Health were doing a 1 p.m. update every day, and people would log in and watch that on Facebook and so on. I didn't, to be honest. But there was a high level of, I think, communication strategy behind that, and that meant people bought in very well.
Mm. Well, you definitely got a few things right, that's for sure, because you guys have, as you said, been back to normal for some time now, and perhaps that culture of compliance, that understanding that all being in it together has paid off. I did see, I confess, Thomas, scrolling your LinkedIn, looking for what you'd been up to lately. I did see some photos there, and I can't remember exactly what it was. Seemed to be junior lawyers. I don't know if it was an admission ceremony or something. And it was a photo very recent, just this week or 2 weeks ago, of, say, 5 young people standing together with their certificates shoulder to shoulder. And I looked at it, and my immediate thought was, whoa, you don't see that in Australia, or at least not Victoria, Queen, the eastern states, anywhere. We're very conscious. And of course, to be photographed standing so close together would not happen here.
Yes, and we've had university graduations and things like that have been cancelled, but I think there is a sense that it is back to normal, and you can, I don't know, go out and move freely and all that sort of thing, and buy what you need to at whatever shop you want to go to. But I think also it is interesting because at the time there was a very real sense of jealousy among some people about how Australia was staying in level 3, and you could still shop as normal with social distancing. And some people really, really miss their shopping and miss their social contact and so on. And look, there was one incident that struck with me, and it was actually walking around on Anzac Day and seeing the poppies that people had put on their walls and on their fences, and one of them saying, they sacrificed themselves for our freedom. And it was an interesting reflection at the time that, for better or for worse, New Zealanders had been very willing to give up their freedoms generally in favour of the COVID lockdown. I think now, yes, people probably would reflect it was the right decision in a lot of ways. But I think the timing of when we came out of lockdown was a big topic of debate, and became quite a political one for a while. There were billboards up saying, "Let us out, Jacinda," and things like that. And there was a lot of, I think, commentary from the medical community that maybe a bit longer would be better. So still very mixed views, but a high degree of compliance.
Yes, well, there would be plenty there who could now be saying, I told you so. We did the right thing, and there was no need to be jealous of the Australians as we continue
Indeed.
to struggle through. Now, I just want to draw each of our attention to some comments that are here in the comments section. Henry, who is our resident Melbourne grad listener, is giving us a link here. I'm just going to pop that up on the screen for the rules around face covering in Victoria. Awesome. Thank you, Henry. And I'm looking just from the link there, when do I have to wear a face covering? So that might be good to click through and have a look at. I might do that a little bit later. Excuse me, Henry, thank you for sharing that. Natalie has come in. Hello, nice to see you, Natalie. It has been too long. I know you have been a very busy lady. Henry is also giving you a special welcome there, Thomas. I'm not going to attempt to pronounce that incorrectly.
Kia ora, Henry.
Thank you, Henry. Thomas, I haven't asked you, Thomas, what you're drinking today. I'm here just chugging away on my bubbles.
Right. So I have a Syrah.
Lovely. Very sophisticated.
And water.
Good. Yes, I have my water here there as well. There we go.
Being 40, I'm allowed to drink red wine.
All grown up. You are. I seem to remember the last time, not the last time, it was some time ago. I think it was in New Zealand when we caught up at a lawyers' conference. We were talking beer.
Hmm. The
You
quality of
don't
New Zealand
remember?
beer is great. And no, I drink less beer these days, being 40 and all.
Oh, indeed, all grown up and about to embark on your own legal practice. Tell us
Hmm.
about it, Thomas. Is this something you've always wanted to do, and now is the right time post COVID in New Zealand? Where is this inspiration coming from?
Sure. I think one of the benefits of lockdown is it allowed a period of reflection, and what I found was, much as I absolutely love the team I manage at work, and the firm I've been part of for now 16 years, just reflected that it was time for a change. And there's been various changes in personal circumstances in my life as well, and thought this is the moment. And um, how did I reach that decision? I don't really know. I just reflected on what was the right path for me, what was the right time, and took a seize the day sort of view, and thought it was an opportunity to refine and refocus what I was working on. And I certainly found I didn't mind working from home. I didn't mind, I guess, a little bit of isolation. We still had daily team meetings via Zoom and so on. But I suppose I thought, yeah, this is something I can do differently. Now's the time for a change. And yeah, 2020 has been a very interesting year, and why not?
Good on you. A lot of people say to me, it's a brave step to run your own business, especially when you do it as a sole practitioner. And I'm in that same position. I don't have partners or others who are involved in my business. Just me at the helm, but. That's how I like it, and it doesn't feel brave when I tell people that's how I came out of the womb. My parents were small business owners. I as much as I can take direction from other people, it may not be my first preference to not be able to get up in the morning and decide how I'm going to run the day. And if you are that way inclined, then certainly running your own show helps, but does come with it all the burdens of being a
Mm,
business owner. And I know there are many business owners here watching at the moment who will be able to give you some words of advice. But I think if you enjoy what you're doing, and I know, Thomas, you are still going to focus on unit titles and property law, and I know from having read your papers and listened to you speak at conferences that you are as passionate. I won't say more because there wouldn't be too many more who are more passionate than me about this area of the law. And if you do love serving your clients in that way, then it makes the running of the business that little bit easier.
mm. Yeah, and yes, and I think passion is an important part of it, and there is that element of excuse me, yeah, wanting to drive one's own destiny, I suppose.
Yeah. And I agree with you. What a lot of people have seen, and even those companies, those perhaps larger companies, bigger overheads, the office in the city, the staff members, the big team, are starting to see is there's another way to do things. And it may be a better way, not just a different way, maybe a better way.
Mm,
I have a few years ago, I made the decision to move to the smaller office, to have the smaller team. And I remember at the time saying to some of my mentors, I've always wanted to do this. I've always wanted to run my business in this way. If somebody wants to work with me, they work with me. They don't get sent off down the chain to a junior lawyer. But other lawyers were telling me, but Amanda, that's how legal practice works. That's what you
mm,
do. That's how you make money. That is the structure. But I don't like that. I don't feel that I am able to. And yes, I'm a control freak and a micromanager, but I don't feel that I am comfortable with that. I want to be working with these clients. It means that they pay more, but they get what they need and what they want to be working with me. And that was now about 3 or 4 years ago, and I haven't looked back. So people
Mm.
telling you there's one way to do things, and now that the world has changed a little bit, I'm seeing a lot more people recognize that and see how you can make things perhaps smaller but better and more enjoyable.
Mm. And I think I mean, I've long been of the view there's not one legal services market, there are many. And it's always surprised me that people understand if you buy a tablecloth from the warehouse or Big W or whatever Kmart, it's different from one you buy from Cedar Design. You pay more at different places for different levels of service or product, even. Um,
Yep.
but there seems to be this great assumption that all lawyers are the same, legal services are the same, and I strongly don't believe it's true. I do believe you get what you pay for, and sophisticated clients, I believe, know that too. They know that you can get very different outputs from different people.
Mm. Well, you're definitely in the right place to be part of doing things a little bit differently, Thomas. And I am here if you would like to toss around any ideas for some innovative legal practice in New Zealand. I'm very excited by that prospect. Are
Right.
you looking at particular timing for when you'll be up and running?
Yeah, so that'll be 1 October this year. So weighed up around the exact period of time. I want to do a very organised handover in the firm I'm in, McCaw Lewis. And part of the reason for that, because Australians won't know this, is that 1 April is our balance date, or 31 March is our balance date. So 1 October is exactly halfway through the financial year. So that has a kind of symmetry to it.
Okay, very good. All right. Well, we will be getting an update from you then, I am sure. I am just going to share. Natalie's made a comment here, who I know is also pretty much in business for herself. I think at the moment, Natalie, the passion for doing your thing makes up for the business pressures. That plus freedom of choice. Yes, freedom. It's one thing that when you are part of business groups, which I have been for some time, talking to other business owners, learning from them, that they say the one thing that drives them and the reason they do what they do is freedom, is having that freedom to build your life the way that you want to.
Definitely.
All right, now we just went off on a whole tangent there. I hope that was enjoyable, everyone. Any business owners there who want to chime in, go for it. But I'm going to bring us back to unit titles. I understand that there is a bit of reform going on at the moment, Thomas, when it comes to your unit titles legislation. That is about all that I know. So I'm going to hand over to you to fill us in. What is going on?
Sure. So there is a bill on the table, so to speak, going through Parliament in its first reading, and I'm just going to flick over to what it's actually called because it's got a very long name, which is Unit Titles (bracket) Strengthening Body Corporate Governance and Other Matters (close bracket) Amendment Bill.
I love it.
And quite a mouthful. A little bit of context. We have one act which covers the whole of New Zealand because we don't have different states or territories here. And how would I describe it? It's probably somewhere between uh, New South Wales and Queensland in terms of its model. What I've found whenever I've gone to conferences in Australia is there is a much higher degree of prescription overseas in certain areas. So
Here,
in
higher
Australia,
degree. Yeah.
yes, compared to New Zealand, there have been more issues come up around lot entitlements and around insurance commissions for managers and all those things. And there's been, for whatever reason, a greater degree of legislative response to those in Australia, it seems. So when you're talking about what bylaws can and cannot cover, in New Zealand, that's almost entirely a matter of case law. There's nothing in the statute about it. It just says you can have rules relating to administration and use and control and so on. But almost all the cases have then struck down rules that try to go too far. So
Mhm.
it's become a very, very interesting situation where we have a statute and then we have case law which has had to rewrite that statute because it's had so many technical flaws. Uh, so this is partly an exercise, this new bill is partly an exercise in fixing up some of those technical flaws. there's been a position in the Act where, in theory, everything should be a special resolution, and the courts have said, well, that's obviously doesn't make sense. So we'll interpret that as meaning an ordinary resolution unless a special resolution is required for a special reason. Those kind of things are being tidied up in the Act. Been a lot of attention on proxy farming. So this bill covers the issue of limitations on proxies. It covers issues around managers. So again, under our old Act, we had a role of a body corporate secretary written into the statute. That then became a matter entirely of contract, and now we're pegging it back to a matter of regulation, where the statute itself will regulate body corporate managers. There are provisions around disclosure, and obviously a big topic in Australia. It's been a topic of less interest in New Zealand, but they're trying to tidy up and affirm what should be disclosed and what are the consequences if things aren't disclosed properly. So there's a whole grab bag of changes, more about committees, more about levy payments, and one of the other big changes is reducing the costs of dispute resolution. So we had a situation under the Unit Titles Act when it came in, where disputes were to go to the Tenancy Tribunal, which normally deals with residential landlords and tenants. That cost $20 to bring a dispute to. When they brought the new Act in, they said unit title disputes will be heard in tribunal, and it will cost $3,300 application fee to bring a claim in disputes tribunal for a complex claim. That made it the most expensive legal forum in New Zealand for whatever reason, I guess cost recovery. So part of this reform round is to pare back those costs a bit so that they're a bit more manageable.
Well, I hope the administratively they are ready for the influx now that the filing fee or whatever it is going to be much cheaper. Perhaps more disputes will be before the tribunal.
Which I think will be a positive. I think it's going to favour a bit more access to justice, which is part of the idea of introducing the Tenancy Tribunal regime or jurisdiction in the first place.
Yeah, I agree. Proxy limits, we had those introduced in New South Wales when our 2015 Act started in 2016. Still tidying up a few things when it comes to the interpretation of those provisions. Do you know, Thomas, how you're planning to deal with those, how that's going to be framed in the legislation, what the limits will be?
Yeah, so it's saying developments of a certain size will only be allowed to have one proxy per unit. And then it's saying beyond that size, it's going to be percentage restriction.
Yep.
And they have been a real big issue with overseas owners in particular. It has been the impression anyway that one person in a development will get appointed as proxy for 30 owners out of 100 who live overseas, and all of a sudden decision making is skewed.
Yes. In New South Wales, we have, and you're probably getting something quite similar, in a scheme of 20 lots or less, one person can hold one proxy. More than 20 lots, it is the equivalent number that is 5% of the number of lots. And we are about to get some clarification. This hasn't started yet. I hope I'm right, but I think this is coming in with a change to our legislation that it was geared towards sustainability infrastructure. So we want to be able to, in New South Wales, approve any sustainability infrastructure, solar panels or that kind of thing with an ordinary resolution rather than a special resolution. So we're lowering the threshold of approval to be able to get those good works projects through. Together with that legislation is a clarification about our proxy limits rule and about how we fill out proxy forms. It was something that members were asking in my forum some months ago. We had a discussion about this. If you have a limit on proxies, can somebody, a single owner who owns 2 or 3 lots, lots in a building, for example, still appoint one proxy on one form and list their 3 lots. And I had a debate with a member about that who asked me a question, and they said, Amanda, Fair Trading has told me they can't. Even if they own 3 lots, they have to appoint 3 different proxy holders because we're in a small building. And I said that doesn't make any sense. Why the legislation would not have been designed to require one owner who's got 3 votes anyway, because they're one owner with 3 lots, to send 3 different people to a meeting if they wanted to appoint a proxy. And they are amending, if anybody is not across this, amending our New South Wales legislation to make that very clear, that if you own more than one lot, then appointing one person to vote on behalf of all of those lots doesn't breach the proxy limits rule, which I think is an important clarification.
You made me think, Amanda, that one of the interesting things about proxies is their relationship, or perhaps inverse relationship, with technology. And the idea behind a proxy is you appoint someone because you can't attend a meeting. And 2 points on New Zealand body corporate law there. Part of a suite of changes around COVID was to give people the right to attend a body corporate meeting virtually during the period of lockdown and for a period after. And this was done across a range of areas of law, like incorporated societies and so on, with a time limit on it. And one of the other changes being introduced, or suggested by this bill, is the idea that a body corporate will be able to decide by special resolution that meetings may be held virtually. What is still slightly interesting is this idea that it's still an opt-in. It's not automatically as of right that you can attend a meeting virtually. But it should, in theory, reduce the need for proxies. If we can all log in at a particular time, then location becomes much less important.
Yes, and you're probably introducing that at a good time, Thomas, when everybody, as I said earlier, everyone's become more comfortable with technology, because we had that opportunity to opt in to electronic voting and electronic meetings. That opportunity was put into our New South Wales legislation back with our 2015 Act. And I think the strata managers here will tell you the take-up of that. While a lot of buildings passed the resolution so they could hold those meetings if they wanted, it just wasn't happening. I think perhaps strata management companies might have felt a little bit overwhelmed with the technology, thinking, oh, well, we need sophisticated voting software to be able to set this up, to offer it to buildings. It's all a bit complicated. Unless everybody's doing it, there's no point. We'll stick with what we always did. Well, then, of course, COVID hit and we've all had to jump online. We've had to buy the Zoom subscription if you don't want to be kicked off after 45 minutes, and hold these electronic meetings. And managers, like the managers I'm talking to, and the buildings are loving it, are realizing how easy it is. Quicker meetings, managers not having to travel, everybody getting more comfortable with that. And hopefully in New Zealand, when you're introducing this now, after everyone has become comfortable, you're going to see that really take off, perhaps.
And yes, the rider, I suppose I put, as I was involved in a virtual body corporate meeting where we had over 400 units in the development, and the quorum fixed by law in New Zealand is 25%, and we fell just short. And yeah, I felt pretty sorry for everyone who'd spent a lot of time logging in, waiting around, making sure they had their technology going, and then just to fall short. We still have an adjournment system in New Zealand where you adjourn for a week and reconvene, and whoever is there can meet the minimum. But I think it's important to remember that while technology is convenient, it doesn't solve all the problems, I suppose, and you've still got to get the logistics of a minimum number of people there.
Yeah. And there's also that question of community and community building and getting people together to share time and space as human beings. It's something that I've been looking closely at. I'll just show you a little hint. I've been chatting to somebody who has published this book. I'm trying not to give too much away. Members will perhaps have an idea of what I'm talking about because of the special something that I have coming up. I'm being very cheeky here, building communities and how important that is in our strata and owners corporations, unit titles, communities. And I think with the online and the rise of online, we have to be more conscious than ever of that. And especially at a time which is hopefully as short as possible and temporary, when we can't be getting together and having those social interactions before a meeting, after a meeting. The meeting should, in my view, always have that level of formality, but being able to connect with your neighbours on a less formal level, it's hard to do during a Zoom meeting, that's for sure.
Yes, well, I'll probably get in trouble for expressing some scepticism at the idea that people come to a body corporate meeting to build community. But I get what you're saying. I think, well, I think you've got to balance that with privacy, and people like their own home because of a sense of privacy as much as they like a neighbourhood because of community. And obviously, those issues are amplified whichever way you go by a body corporate or a strata setup.
Now, we have a few more comments popping up here. In the limited time we have left, I just want to acknowledge Vicky, who was saying, congratulations, Thomas. Back when we were talking about your new venture, starting your own practice.
Hi, Vicky. Cheers.
And Colin has a comment here about proxies. Let's get real. The proxy system has not been beaten. The problem is how a major strata owner influences the whole strata on the 25% rule. I wonder if there, Colin, you're talking about being able to requisition a meeting, or perhaps being able to or maybe a special resolution. There's a couple of 25% rules, Colin, as I'm sure you know. So perhaps being able to knock down a special resolution if you have 25% of the vote. Yep. Natalie, I think, is agreeing there with you, Thomas. There are so many less proxies now because of the electronic meetings. So yeah, good to know that. More involvement from investor owners. Hybrid meetings, I think, will be the future. Ooh, that is interesting. Yeah, if you want to be there in person to have that sense of community, as I say, you can be there in person, or you can be on the conference call, perhaps. Very good. I can see a question there from Elizabeth about nominees and proxies. I may get to that, Elizabeth, or I may come back. If I don't answer it here live, I'll come back and post a comment for you. Oh, and Natalie's perhaps answering that for you, Elizabeth. I hope that helps. What I do want to get to before I know we have to finish up, and it's getting a little bit late in New Zealand, and Thomas is probably hungry and wants to go and spend some time with his family. I want to talk about your book, Thomas. You have been very busy and recently published a book about unit titles law. Tell us.
Yeah, no, this one's not specifically about unit titles, but yeah, no, I do a lot of writing, and the two most recent books, one of them is called McMorland and Gibbons on unit titles and cross leases, and so that's I suppose, an extract from a bigger book, and the bigger book is called Principles of Land Law in New Zealand, third edition. And it is an absolute brick. It is 2 volumes. So it's designed to cover both practitioner market and student market, because let's face it, our New Zealand market overall is not that great or not that big for legal texts. But yeah, there was definitely some rewriting, some of it over summer, around that, and keeping up with developments in the case law. And also I took a view, this was a particular parts I was updating of the principles text, one of which was a long chapter on unit titles, was an opportunity to recast that. And I think in New Zealand, unit titles have been seen in the context of a way of subdividing land, and maybe a method of tenure. And what I wanted to recast was this idea that they're more a way of living, and we have to think about very different issues, which are not just traditional land law issues of freehold versus leasehold versus something else. These are issues about how our cities are designed, how we avoid sprawl, how we use land efficiently, how we bundle people together in small spaces, how we live in a way that enhances public transport amenity, how our societies are changing, and so on. And obviously that could be a book itself, and here it was a few pages, but for me, it was a real opportunity to hopefully get students to rethink about what land law is within the context of unit titles, and how it's a very very different kind of way of thinking than the idea of a couple or a family on a farm, which is the traditional New Zealand understanding of land law. It's something very different to that, and that was quite exciting.
Yes, well, I agree, and that's what interests me and drives me to stick with and learn more about this area of the law, because I too think it's so fascinating. Do you have, are you similar to Australia, perhaps, where you have in New Zealand a lack of lawyers who specialise in this area or want to specialise or are aware that unit titles is a unique area of the law?
I think there's a growing appreciation that it's a new area of law, and in the 10 years since the Unit Titles Act came in, it's and we had an act before then, but it was very old and out of date. It was 1972. So our cities over the last 10 years have become even more intense, and issues have become even more prominent. So yeah, there are a reasonable number. I'd say there's 10 or 12 people in New Zealand, probably not that many, but not that big a number, but still a relevant number of people who I would think of as unit title specialists. And some of them are primarily property lawyers or conveyancers, and some of them are litigators, and some of them are a bit of both, and some of them are neither. But there is an increasing focus on this area of law, and our cities are becoming more intense, and the number of issues is quite simply growing.
Yep, indeed. Lots there for your new practice, for sure, Thomas.
Yes, definitely. Hopefully enough to put food on the table.
You're going to be just fine. I did say to Thomas off air that I think he is has the personality and is cut out for sole practice. And looking forward to seeing how you manage it all.
Thanks, Amanda.
And we're seeing some more congratulations there in the comments, I think, on your book there, Thomas. Thank you, Ronald, and Natalie, and Petra is saying thanks too. Well, wowee, it is 5 o'clock here in Sydney. It is, I believe, 7 o'clock in New Zealand. Go and get some dinner, Thomas. Thank you so much for being our special guest today.
No, thank you, Amanda. It's always a pleasure.
And maybe someday in another life, sometime, I will see you at a lawyers conference. We do actually, if you have seen your inbox, have our annual lawyers conference scheduled in for Sydney for April 2021, hopefully.
Yes, I'm on the Axel conference committee, so
I don't have to tell you then.
come hell or high water, it will happen. No, I can't guarantee that, but no, definitely looking forward to it.
And you're going to do it, put it all online, and we're going to do it virtually if we can't meet, right? And you're going to organise all that, aren't you?
We'll make it happen, definitely.
Of course. Well, thank you, everybody, for tuning in. If you have enjoyed today's conversation, if you'd like others to enjoy it too, please give us a thumbs up. If you want to share it to a page, if you want to share it with your friends, go ahead. Thank you all for being here. Enjoy your weekends wherever you are. If you are in Melbourne, we are thinking of you. We love you. We care about you. We're sending hugs. See you online. We will get through this together. Have a good weekend, all.